course, it's my great pleasure to welcome you today to this webinar on food import risk analysis, the Canadian experience, featuring the Canadian Food Inspection Agency's Food Import Risk Explorer, or what is known as FIRE. Today's event is organized by G-Force in partnership with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and under the auspices of the AFRAF Academy, and that is the African Food Regulatory Authorities Forum Capacity Building Program known as AFRAF Academy. We are particularly pleased to welcome participants joining us from every region of Africa, as well as all colleagues from other parts of the world. We are offering simultaneous interpretation to Arabic throughout this webinar, so we ask you to select the corresponding channel of interpretation. And true to our Canadian form, we will offer this webinar in a bilingual form, English and French, for the public and moderated segments. However, we will offer also simultaneous interpretation to French for the presentation that will be given by our colleagues from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So at that point, we will ask you to switch to French interpretation for those who wish to follow in French. Today's webinar illustrates one of the core principles of food regulatory science, sharing practical regulatory experience across countries to strengthen food systems globally. And as you know, Canada has been a global leader in developing innovative approaches to food import oversight. And we will have the privilege today of learning directly from experts of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency who designed and who are overseeing the implementation of this system. And we are very thankful for colleagues from the CFIA and to the entire team for your collaboration and the time you are devoting to experience sharing and to knowledge dissemination. Bonjour ou bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Mon nom est Samuel Godefroy, je suis professeur en analyse des risques et politique réglementaire des aliments à l'Université Laval, à Québec, au Canada. J'ai le privilège également d'occuper les fonctions de président et chef des opérations de la Global Food Regulatory Science Society, G-Force. Au nom de G-Force, c'est un immense plaisir pour moi de vous souhaiter à toutes et à tous la bienvenue à ce webinaire qui est consacré aujourd'hui à l'analyse des risques liés aux importations alimentaires, partageant en fait l'expérience canadienne avec la présentation du système Food Import Risk Explorer ou FIRE, qui a été développé par l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments. Donc, ce webinaire est organisé aujourd'hui par G-Force en partenariat avec l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments, donc la SIA, sous les auspices de la AFRAF Academy, qui est la nouvelle plateforme de renforcement des capacités et compétences du Forum africain des autorités réglementaires des aliments, le AFRAF. Nous sommes particulièrement heureux d'accueillir tous nos collègues et tous les participants qui proviennent de toutes les régions d'Afrique, ainsi que tous les collègues qui nous rejoignent de toutes les régions du monde. Une interprétation simultanée vers l'arabe est offerte pendant l'ensemble du webinaire et donc nous invitons les participants qui le souhaitent à sélectionner le canal d'interprétation correspondant. Alors, fidèle à notre tradition canadienne de bilinguisme, nous allons également offrir ce webinaire en anglais et en français pour toutes les parties publiques ou les parties modérées. Les présentations, quant à elles, donc celles qui vont être données par nos collègues de l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments, seront données en anglais, mais une interprétation simultanée au français sera disponible. Nous vous inviterons à ce moment-là de sélectionner le canal d'interprétation au français au début de ces présentations. Donc, le webinaire d'aujourd'hui va tenter d'illustrer un des principes fondamentaux des sciences réglementaires des aliments et contribuer au partage d'expériences concrètes entre les autorités réglementaires en tentant, bien entendu, de renforcer les systèmes de sécurité sanitaire des aliments à travers le monde. Le Canada, comme vous le savez, est reconnu comme chef de file mondial dans le développement d'approches novatrices pour la surveillance des importations alimentaires. Et nous avons le privilège aujourd'hui d'écouter directement des experts de l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments qui ont conçu et qui sont en train de mettre en œuvre ce système innovant.
Africa's food systems are changing rapidly. Trade is growing, food supply chains are expanding, new technologies are creating new opportunities, and new regulatory challenges. To protect consumers, facilitate trade, and support economic development, Africa needs strong food regulatory authorities powered by skilled and competent professionals. This is why the African Food Regulatory Authorities Forum, AFRAF, created the AFRAF Academy. The AFRAF Academy is a continental platform that brings African food regulators together to coordinate capacity building, share expertise, and strengthen regulatory competencies across the continent. Its mission is to connect people, knowledge, and institutions to build the workforce needed for modern food regulation. Through the AFRAF Academy, regulators collaborate to identify competency needs, develop learning programs, and deliver practical capacity building activities. These include training courses, workshops, webinars, peer learning exchanges, mentoring initiatives, competency assessment programs, and the dissemination of technical knowledge and regulatory best practices. By leveraging expertise that already exists across Africa, the Academy helps transform knowledge into action and learning into impact. Supporting food safety, SPS harmonization, and the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFRAF Academy is helping build a stronger and more connected community of food regulators across Africa. AFRAF Academy, connecting expertise, delivering capacity, advancing food regulatory excellence across Africa. AFRAF Academy, building excellence, strengthening food systems.
And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce one of our guests of honors who have agreed to contribute to the opening of this webinar. Dr. Mamadou Ba is one of the AFRAF champions and serves as the Director General of the Food Safety and Quality Authority of the Gambia. Dr. Ba is also the chair of the FAO WHO Coordinating Committee for Africa, CC Africa, in both capacities. Dr. Ba has been a strong advocate for strengthening food control systems, regional cooperation, and science-based decision-making across Africa. C'est maintenant pour moi un grand plaisir donc d'inviter un de nos premiers invités d'honneur qui contribue à l'ouverture de ce webinaire, Dr. Mamadou Ba, est le directeur général de l'Autorité de sécurité sanitaire et de qualité des aliments de la Gambie, qui assure également la présidence du comité de coordination FAO-OMS pour l'Afrique, le CC Africa. Dans ces deux fonctions, Dr. Ba s'est imposé comme un ardent défenseur du renforcement des systèmes de contrôle des aliments, de la coopération régionale et de la prise de décision fondée sur les aspects scientifiques à travers le continent africain. Dr. Ba, c'est un grand plaisir de vous accueillir parmi nous et je vous cède donc la parole.
Merci, prof. Je voudrais continuer en français, mais permettez-moi de donner mes mots en anglais, s'il vous plaît. Thank you, Prof, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this webinar, which is a very important step in the food safety systems for Africa. If you know that food security largely is dependent on imports, particularly in the African region. So Africa actually loses $97 billion or has lost $97 billion from 2021, which is the post-COVID, to 2023. And out of that, Egypt alone has $16 billion of that share. So the most commodities actually imported with wheat, rice, sugar, oil, vegetables, and dairy and meat. So this is actually used to support our food security. And all these pose food safety risks. But then the risk analysis webinar, we believe, would lead to proper regulatory procedures and processes, and also improve consumer health once these are practiced. It's also risk analysis ensures scientific and evidence-based food safety systems for not only us, the regulatory bodies, but all competent bodies that are involved in the food chain or food value chain. The webinar and its experience, which is shared by Canada, we believe will contribute meaningfully to the CC Africa's growing need for science and evidence-driven systems. We also believe that with the risk assessments, the risk communication, and the right risk management, we will contribute to building a very safe food safety system that will not only promote consumer health, but also increase the volume of trading inter and intra-Africa. So with that, I wish you a very successful webinar. I may not be able to stay with you throughout the webinar, but I am really looking forward to the recordings and following up on all the things that have been shared and discussed so that I can also benefit with my team on the experiences that have been shared by Canada and the able professors. The lineup that I have seen, quite impressive. So we'll make sure that we make good use of it. And we thank the organizers, G-Force, who is always ahead of us in terms of the sciences, in terms of the risk analysis, which is very, very important for food safety systems. So once again, with the leadership of Prof. Godfrey, I thank you for your attention.
I would like to thank Dr. Ba again for his contribution and his leadership within AFRAF. And if you allow me a very short summary of the intervention of Dr. Ba in French. Donc, le Dr. Ba a exprimé l'importance d'un webinaire comme celui d'aujourd'hui en réitérant notamment l'impact des importations alimentaires dans les systèmes alimentaires africains, et le fait que de baser le contrôle des systèmes d'importation sur les aspects scientifiques et notamment sur l'analyse de risque est un contributeur certain à l'innocuité des aliments à travers le continent africain, à la sécurité alimentaire, mais également à renforcer les échanges commerciaux intra- et intercontinentaux, donc dans le cadre de l'harmonisation réglementaire des systèmes de contrôle des aliments en Afrique. Encore merci, Dr. Ba. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Charles Aworth, co-senior mentor of the AFRAF Academy. Professor Charles Aworth doesn't need an introduction, an eminent academician, an eminent leader in food safety in Nigeria and across the African continent, as well as globally. He's very recognized for his outstanding contributions to food science, food safety, and higher education across Africa. And Professor Aworth has kindly agreed to serve as one of the senior mentors of the AFRAF Academy. Donc, j'ai le grand plaisir de présenter le professeur Charles Aworth, le co-menteur principal de l'Académie AFRAF. Le professeur Aworth est reconnu à l'échelle internationale pour toutes ses contributions aux sciences des aliments, à la sécurité sanitaire des aliments et à l'enseignement supérieur en Afrique. Il a accepté notamment de mettre son immense expérience au service de l'Académie de la FRAF en tant que l'un de ses co-menteurs. Professor Aworth, thank you for your leadership and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, for that kind introduction. It is indeed an honor and privilege to be invited to be part of this webinar as co-senior mentor of AFRAF Academy. Needless to say, Africa bears a very heavy burden of foodborne illnesses, indeed one of the highest in the world, due to unsafe foods. So for us, the issue of food regulation and food safety and the need to build capacity is really very, very crucial. Food regulation is very weak in sub-Saharan Africa, and food regulatory agencies, where they exist in sub-Saharan African countries, lack the necessary capacity to deal with the challenges of unsafe foods. Where food laws and regulations exist, they are invariably very weak, and the capacity to enforce them is often lacking. There is essentially, in most countries of sub-Saharan Africa, no regulation of traditional foods and the informal food sector. And these are critical components in the food systems of Africa. Nigeria, for example, spends about $10 billion annually on the importation of foods that can be produced locally and by doing so, small-scale farmers that are responsible for close to 90% of food production are discouraged in terms of production and are impoverished. So this has, of course, tremendous effects on food insecurity and the issue of food safety. So there is the need to build capacity, not just for increasing food production, but to ensure that the food value chain is strengthened, post-harvest losses are reduced, and food safety is enhanced. This must happen if we must deal with the problem of food insecurity and the problem of foodborne diseases that are indeed very, very damaging. So I just wish to commend AFRAF for the work it is doing, and I'm really fully committed to the responsibility that has been given to me as a senior mentor of the AFRAF Academy. And I would want in particular to commend Professor Samuel Godefroy for his initiative and vision, and pledge really to be part of this effort at addressing a very, very important issue when it comes to the development of Africa. So I'm looking forward to be part of this webinar throughout, and looking forward to a really successful webinar. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you so much, Charles. And once again, thank you for your leadership and for agreeing to be one of the co-mentors of the AFRAF Academy. Un bref résumé de l'intervention du professeur Haworth. Professeur Haworth a mentionné l'impact des maladies d'origine alimentaire sur les systèmes de santé en Afrique, mais également sur les systèmes économiques, et a réitéré l'importance de la contribution du AFRAF et surtout du AFRAF Academy aux échanges d'expériences entre les autorités réglementaires, mais également entre les autorités réglementaires à travers le monde, de façon à rehausser le niveau de performance des systèmes de contrôle des aliments à travers le continent africain. Encore une fois, merci, professeur Charles Haworth. Le Canada, comme vous le savez, est reconnu comme un chef de file mondial en matière de réglementation alimentaire et de partage de son expertise avec les autorités réglementaires du monde. Nous sommes particulièrement reconnaissants à l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments pour son engagement continu à soutenir le renforcement des capacités et la coopération internationale à mesure que le commerce international se développe. Et donc, nous savons que les aliments importés occupent une place de plus en plus importante dans l'approvisionnement alimentaire à travers le monde, mais dans l'approvisionnement alimentaire canadien. C'est pourquoi assurer le contrôle de cet apport alimentaire exige d'aller au-delà des inspections de routine pour adopter des approches modernes, des approches fondées sur la science et surtout sur l'analyse des risques et les données probantes. C'est ce que nous allons essayer d'apprendre à travers ce webinaire. Donc, Canada has long been recognized as a global leader in food regulatory science and in generously sharing its expertise with regulatory authorities around the world. We're particularly grateful to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for its continued commitment to international collaboration and to capacity building. And as we know, as international trade continues to expand, imported food represents an increasing proportion of food supplies at all levels, including at the national level here in Canada. Effective import control, therefore, requires moving beyond routine inspection towards modern, science-based and risk-informed decision-making. That's what we hope to learn more about the Canadian system to control import based on risk.
Safe food, healthy animals, disease and pest-free plants. At the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, we inspect to protect you, your family, the environment, and the economy. We're powered by our people, and it's their dedication that drives us forward. Our more than 6,000 employees step up to the plate each day to make sure what's on your plate is safe, high-quality food. Safe food starts with healthy plants and animals. That's why we also work to prevent the spread of invasive plants, plant pests, and animal diseases. Science is at the heart of everything we do. We're ready to respond to the challenges of the modern world, including a global food supply chain, climate change, and emerging diseases. We are the CFIA.
Donc, pour nous présenter cette expérience canadienne et le Food Import Risk Explorer FIRE, nous avons le privilège d'accueillir une équipe exceptionnelle composée de Madame Pamela McDormand, directrice générale des opérations alimentaires à l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments, de Madame Catherine Sample, responsable des programmes et des politiques, et de Monsieur Ashwani Tiwari, responsable de l'analyse avancée des données et de la modélisation des risques, ainsi que de Monsieur Greg Powley, président et directeur général et scientifique principal de la compagnie Risk Science International, et également membre fondateur de la Global Food Regulatory Science Society. To present Canada's experience and introduce the Food Import Risk Explorer FIRE, we're privileged to welcome an outstanding panel of experts from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Ms. Pamela MacDonald, Director General of Food Operations, Ms. Catherine Sample, Program and Policy Leader, Mr. Ashwani Tiwari, the lead for Advanced Data Analytics and Risk Modeling, all from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I'm also pleased to introduce Mr. Greg Powley, Chief Executive Officer and Principal Scientist at Risk Science International and a co-founding member of the Global Food Regulatory Science Society. Dear colleagues, again, thank you for agreeing to join us today, and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Pamela MacDonald. As mentioned, I'm the Director General of Food Operations at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and I want to begin by saying how genuinely pleased I am to be part of the G-Force community of practice and to be with you this morning. So thank you so much for the opportunity. The challenges you're navigating as food regulators, managing increasingly complex, globally integrated supply chains with finite resources, are challenges we share. That shared reality is precisely why forums like this one matter. Today, my colleagues Ashwani Tiwari and Catherine Simple, along with Greg Paoli from Risk Science International, will walk you through the Canadian experience developing the risk modeling tool we call FIRE, the Food Import Risk Explorer model. Canada has long been committed to risk-informed oversight of domestic and imported foods. FIRE represents our latest step in that journey, bringing machine learning, artificial intelligence, and risk modeling to bear so that our decisions become more science-based, more transparent, and more precise. I hope it will be both practically useful and spark ideas you can adapt for your own contexts. Let me set the stage with a bit of context on why this challenge matters so much for Canada. Next slide. So Canada is one of the world's largest food importers. In 2025, we imported $69.4 billion in agri-food and seafood products from over 220 trading partners across the globe. As you can see on this slide, the United States remains our single largest source, accounting for just under half of that total by value. The remainder reflects a genuinely global supply chain: Latin America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond. Canadians import food for a range of reasons: seasonal availability, the cultural diversity of our communities, and to fill gaps that domestic production simply cannot meet year-round. But this scale and diversity also creates a real regulatory challenge, and this scale and diversity is increasing with every year. 220 trading partners means 220 different production environments, regulatory standards, and risk profiles. Managing that complexity requires moving beyond experience-based judgment toward approaches that are systemic, scientific data-driven, and transparent. That is the challenge FIRE is designed to address. Next slide. Our goal is to apply risk control measures at the most effective point in the import process. Doing that well requires integrating multiple inputs: the nature and magnitude of the risk, what our operational data is telling us, what risk intelligence is flagging, and the resources we have available to act. Canada has built this capability progressively. We were already doing risk-informed oversight before FIRE, but as the complexity of our import landscape has grown, so too has the need for risk tools that are faster, more precise, and more defensible. What this slide reflects is that we rely on a layered dynamic system, one that adapts as risks evolve, as trading patterns shift, and as new evidence becomes available. It is not a static model. It is a dynamic and responsive one. And I want to underline one point for this audience in particular. Science-based, transparent decisions are not just better for public health. They strengthen trade relationships. When you can show exactly what your risk evidence says and why a decision was made, it changes the nature of that conversation with trading partners entirely. With that context in place, I will hand it over to Ashwani, Catherine, and Greg, who will take you through how FIRE works and what we have learned putting it into practice. Next slide, and over to you all.
Thank you, Pam, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening tout le monde. Merci, and happy anniversary to G-Force. We're very honored to be here today to present our experience with the FIRE model. As Pam mentioned, we had been shifting away from our experience-based decision making, and we really wanted to start to develop something to enable us to more systematically identify and prioritize risks related to imported food. This, we envisioned, would enable us to apply more rigor and transparency, and ultimately to enhance accountability in making decisions. We would be better able to direct resources to where they'll be most effective and efficient at mitigating risks related to imported foods. So Ashwani and Greg and their team have developed a very innovative model for us that estimates imported food safety risks in disability adjusted life years, DALYs. That's a common currency. And they've done it at the food hazard and country of origin level, which is very unique. You will see later that FIRE enables us to better understand the risk landscape with respect to imported foods. It helps us compare relative risks across different food, microbial hazard, and country of origin combinations. That's the current model. And we, in the future, will be able to also compare across different hazard types, microbiological, chemical, and allergens. FIRE is enabling us to monitor, and we're moving into the forecasting space regarding trends in imported food safety risks. And you can imagine that this is helping us to help prioritize the risks that we want to really dig into and understand in order to help us inform our program design and our work plans. Next slide, please. So the imported food safety space is a bit of a continuum, as you can imagine. We first need to start out by identifying areas that we want to understand better. So gathering that intelligence, and FIRE is really helping us to do that by providing those risk rankings by food hazard and country of origin. We use that information to help inform and prioritize the program reviews that we do routinely, again, to dig in and better understand all aspects of that particular food hazard country of origin combination, or maybe it's just a food hazard combination. And by conducting that comprehensive analysis, we can identify gaps in our program design and areas that we want to enhance our risk controls. So some of those control measures might include our offshore work plans. So we do have a program whereby we go to other countries with which we trade food, and we either analyze controls in place at specific establishments, but also we look at the country level controls and potential gaps in those systems, working together with our foreign counterparts to improve, enhance existing controls. So we all benefit. We can also target specific importers. So if we have identified a particular area of concern with respect to a particular food, for instance, we can actually direct some resources to importers who import that food to make sure that they've got things well in hand. We can use FIRE to identify sampling gaps and to ultimately change our sampling plan design if we feel that there is a gap there. We also have another tool called FishNet, which FIRE can plug into to help estimate the risk of particular import shipments coming into Canada. And we can use that tool to help us target our sampling resources. So if we're looking for samples of a particular food, perhaps from a particular country of origin or a region, we can use FishNet to identify particular shipments of that food coming into Canada and direct resources to take samples of that food. So you'll see in the upcoming slides how FIRE works and all the different components behind it, and how we're using AI and machine learning to enhance FIRE's abilities. I'll be back again at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. So as Pam and Catherine mentioned, as our risks are dynamic and they are changing, we wanted our risk assessment and risk management tools also to be dynamic, that allows us to be nimble in terms of risk management, our options available. But as we talk about, we want it to be precise, we want to be nimble. As you can see that this is just a little bit of way that how much data it requires these types of models. And for us to be nimble and to be responsive, we just couldn't do all that data extraction mapping by hands. And this is where actually we are very lucky to have, in a time where we have these machine learning AI tools available, where in FHIR, as you can see on the left side, the data sources, we have more than 10 sources that from where the data is coming. And in order for us to be dynamic and nimble, we have been able to automate the extraction of the data. And then we are using the large language models because all these data sets basically have a different way of classifying different foods, different hazards, different processing steps. That's where the large language model helps us to bring them into the same classification, so these data can be mapped. And then basically it's fed into our model like FHIR or FishNet, or another model we are working that is for the integrated recall intelligence, that's the forecasting for the recalls. And then basically we are able to share these results with our risk managers like Catherine and our executives like Pam. So this is where, as you can see, that along with the the quantitative risk assessment methodology that we are using in our FHIR model is working in synchronization with machine learning and AI to basically make our risk-informed decision making more precise, nimble, and flexible. Next slide, please. This is just one example that I was just saying that how the large language models are helping us. As you can see that on the top here, when we're saying harmonized data sources, it just shows a little bit that how our data, when it comes to it, it looks like. And then once it goes through the large language models, it's able to make it into tier 1, that is the dairy, the commodity. Then tier 2 is the cheese, and tier 3 is the brand cheese pasteurized. So in that way, and all the data that we are, basically feeding into our model goes through a classification process. Otherwise, that if we do it by hand, it would have taken us by months, or the weeks, depending upon what data sources we have. So this is where it's really giving us extra time that we can really use on the analysis as compared to just processing the data. Next slide, please. So as we can see that what is the value added in the FHIR model with the help of machine learning AI, advanced AI tools, quantitative risk assessment models. Previous approach, data was gathered manually, as I was saying, from multiple sources. Now we have, one automated process where all the information is stored in one place that is connected to Power BI dashboard that allows us to visualize and share the information and the results that our decision makers can use it as evidence in the evidence-based decision making, in the program design and execution. Data structures were inconsistent. I just went through it. That now it is seamless integration of the data set. It's not siloed, it's in one place. Then is the assessment of the perceived risks. It was subjective before the FHIR. And now basically it's objective because it allows us, when we use something like DALIs, it allows us to compare the risks not only at the level of hazards, but we can even compare Salmonella compared to Listeria compared to Campylobacter, and at different combinations of the countries also and the foods also. So this is where the objective quantification really helps us to be compare and be precise. Next step. So now we look into the building blocks and the architecture of the fire. Basically, right now, our model is using close to 17 years of data. So that's what provides us the really precision. And it is some places it's at the month level. Sometimes we even have the weekly information on different data points. So that's where the precision is coming. And it's a 7 years of data. That's what gives us the ability to do the trends and the forecasting. So basically, it starts with what is being imported and from where. That's where the trade data comes in. And that's what we bring from Stats Canada. And then the next piece in our model is what is the prevalence of these hazards like microbial, chemical allergens in our sampling plans, and some of the other data like recall or from literature. Then how much of the foods are being consumed by Canadians. That's where we use the consumption data and the serving size data. That comes from Health Canada and comes from literature. The next one is our the processing steps that, as we all know, that some of the food we consume raw, but some of the food we do, we cook it, we process it. So that impacts the probability of that hazard that will be left before we consume our products. And then is the dose response curve. That's what takes all the probability, that the hazard is there, how much it would be convert into the number of illnesses among Canadians. That's where the risk characterization, the fourth step comes. And then, so this is basically when we talk about on the left side is the bottom up part of the model. And if you look on the right side of the model, that is the Canadian illnesses that we get from Public Health Agency of Canada. We are very lucky to have this information also, and also on the outbreaks information. That's what comes down as the top down. And the beauty of this model is that's why it's called as a hybrid, because it has a bottom up that takes from all the data that is being processed, consumed by consumer, and also from the top down. That means it starts from the total number of illnesses, for example, with the salmonella, and it combines both sides. Because if you look at individually, both of these models have some, I would say, some challenges. And by combining them, each of the bottom-up model basically takes care of some of the challenges that are with the top-down. And the top-down portion of the model basically looks after some of the challenges that are with the bottom-up. So that's why by synchronizing both these models together, we get much better estimates, much more precise estimates. And that is what is basically considered even as a gold standard by some of the recent, for example, EFSA panel on biological hazards. This is considered as one of the gold standards that every country, given they have the resources, they have the scientific information to process it. Next slide, please. And now we'll just talk a little bit about the details. I won't take too much time. As Dr. Godfrey said, that we can always have a little bit more detailed discussions later on. Here, I'll just quickly go through what algorithms we are using. In the bottom-up methodology, as you can see, the first one is our trade. Basically, this is at the food hazard combination country and food hazard combination country and food combination. That is divided by the serving size of the food. Then is the probability of that the hazard is present in this food and country and food has combination. Then is the probability, that is the dose response curve, and then is the dailies per hazard. So these are the four pieces of information that is combined in our bottom-up methodology to assess or to estimate this number. Next slide, please. Estimating prevalence. This is, I know I have put this formulas on it for people who are interested, but I won't go detail into it. Basically, we are using the information from our sampling plans that we are very lucky in Canada. We have a very good thorough sampling plans, and we also have recalls information that we are using. And here we are using the Bayesian hierarchical models to estimate that, because as you know that the prevalences of the hazards that we are looking, they are very, very low. They're less than 0.1%. So we really have to, it's like a statistical nightmare, any statistician's nightmare to develop a model with that less number of prevalence. And that's where we came up. This is a new actually way of and we are really planning to publish this methodology on itself, that how this prevalence can be estimated. We are using the Bayesian hierarchical models, that is using the information from sampling and the recalls history. And we are just not only using the recall history of CFIA, but we are also using the recalls of US, from the Europe. So we are using all the recalls of different countries from where the Canada is importing the food. So that's where it becomes really important. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit a quick example to walk through. As you can see that the first one was, this is just an example, amount of fresh herbs imported from country X, close to 146K, serving size 41 grams. So this is the number one input value. Next slide, please. This is where how the prevalence is estimated. And as you can see that our model is not a deterministic model. That means it does include or adjust for uncertainty, because as you know that in our risk, nothing is for certain. There's a lot of uncertainty, lot of variability, and this is how we are combining the variability and uncertainty here by using the Bayesian analysis and also taking the beta distribution. Next slide, please. This basically explains the dose response curve. That means it converts that depending upon how much was the prevalence of the hazard in the food and how much was the food consumed by population. Basically, this part of the equation helps us to estimate the number of illnesses we will have in population. And basically for Salmonella, we are using dose response curve that was published by WHO. Next slide, please. And this is basically the DALYs for Salmonella. It is 0.049. This is also published by Havelar. We are using from literature. Depending on number of illnesses, how many DALYs are, and it allows us to compare different hazards, because for a Salmonella, the DALYs will be very small compared to Listeria, where the DALYs are much higher. DALYs are basically disability adjusted life years. This is one way of estimating how bad an illness is in simple terms. So that's what allows us. This is the fourth part of the equation. Next slide, please. And as you can see that once we combine all that information, we can say that Salmonella in fresh herbs from country X gives us 15 DALYs. So basically the FIRE model at the bottom up runs for all the thousands of combination to give us this thing. And there is no way in human brain we can do this work every week. And that's what we are trying to go towards. Next slide, please. And now I will give Greg to walk us through the top-down methodology. Great.
Thank you, Ashwani. So just with respect to the top-down methodology, essentially what this process does is it starts with public health surveillance data coming from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and it ultimately divides that into a couple of different categories. One of the main differentiators is whether cases are coming from sporadic pattern of illnesses or whether they're associated with outbreaks. We then further subdivide those into foods sources which are either domestic or imported. So this essentially breaks down the total surveillance data into these essentially four categories. Next slide. So just as an example, you see here Salmonella in fresh fruits and vegetables. These have been essentially estimated to be about 100,000 cases per year. 80% of those approximately are attributed to food as opposed to other sources of Salmonella. And then when we further subdivide those 80,000 cases, you see that approximately 14,000 of those cases are attributed to fresh fruits and vegetables. So this is coming, so that's about 18% of the Salmonella cases coming from fresh fruits and vegetables. We then differentiate between sporadic and outbreak cases. And so you can see that the 14,000 cases are subdivided into sporadic cases, which is the majority, and outbreak associated cases, which are the minority of cases. Next slide, please. And here we see we're further subdividing those into, we now are talking about sporadic cases, and then we have those subdivided into imported and domestic. And now on the right side of the slide, you can see that we're getting down through the contributions of the bottom-up model. We can indicate which particular sources of food are contributing the most. And we can also do that for imported and domestic cases. So that's the combination of the top down and the bottom up. So let's go to the next slide, please. And here you see just further subdividing those cases, in this case, the outbreak cases, into domestic and imported, and then using the bottom up portion of the model, we can contribute and attribute those cases to lower tier food products, such as individual plant products. Next slide. And again, you can see that these can be ultimately merged together to through a process which is called calibration, where you basically have the bottom-up predictions match the top-down attribution from the public health data, which allows us to then allocate all the way down to the level of food, hazard, and country of origin. And you can see that you have a total summing up here, and also using the Salmonella severity weight to generate the final estimate of DALYs. And next slide. And just as an example, here you can also do a variety of ways of summarizing the comparative risk using the FIRE model results. These are just simulated data, not to be understood to be real data, but that's shows you a variety of ways of summarizing it and ranking, and you can see that a particular country and a particular food and a particular hazard is at the top of the list, and other combinations are able to be ranked appropriately. Next slide. This can also be summarized as well at the level of totaling in a variety of ways. We can see what is the country that is contributing the most DALYs. And here you can see that country A, through the combination of lettuce and blackberries, et cetera, from other commodities from country A, has the highest risk. Then country G or country M here on the slide. Next, click. You can also summarize over foods, and you see that lettuce is at the top of this particular list. And the next slide. We'll now see that we can also summarize by each of the contributions of country, food, and hazard. You can summarize over any one of those categories and understand not only which is the highest country, which is the highest food, but also which hazard is contributing the most to the imported food risk picture. Next slide.
Okay, back to me. Thanks, Greg.
And I think I'm handing it back to Ashwani at this point.
Catherine?
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Uh-huh. Can you hear me? I've lost audio. I have lost. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. I'm back. Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, so I think we've got a sense now of all of the different components that go into FIRE. There are a lot of building blocks and a lot of challenges bringing those into the model, with some creative solutions to help us do that and make sure that all of the bits and pieces talk to each other. And we've seen now at the finishing level that you can compare risks across different countries, different foods, and different hazards. So we are now able to be a little more proactive and systematic, and we can estimate those relative risks either the food hazard country of origin level. And again, we would do that to help us prioritize the areas that we really want to explore in more detail with respect to our imported food products. And once we fully understand those gaps and challenges, we can trigger changes to the program design. So the types of risk control measures that we implement. And I think we were starting to see it when I was on screen before, that it's a continuum, right? So once we implement risk control measures, we want to make sure to be able to continue to monitor the effect of those control measures. So are we doing the right things, or do we need to tweak things a little more? So always looking at the outcome and adjusting control measures as needed. Another one of those control measures I mentioned earlier is offshore activities. So our program, again, will allow us to work with other competent authorities to assess the country's food safety control systems, but also we can look at specific establishments in foreign countries to understand the risks that may be there, the challenges, but also some solutions that can help everybody. We can use FIRE to help identify if importers of specific foods from specific countries or regions need to have some targeted inspections or other types of risk control measures like targeted communications, making sure that those importers are aware of particular risks that they need to control. We can, since all of the data is now in FIRE, we're also using it to help us identify areas where we have gaps in sampling. So maybe there are new foods that we've never sampled before. And we are using FIRE as a data hub. So it might not necessarily be necessary to directly implement a program or program change, but we can actually use FIRE as a data hub since everything is in there. And we do that a lot for different reasons. We are using FIRE also to identify recent changes in risks, trends in imports. So as trade patterns change, maybe we see changes in the risk landscape as well. And you can imagine that we are also starting to use FIRE to forecast or to predict changes in risk and emerging issues. So things we haven't seen before, we'll be able to forecast risk patterns with emerging issues. Now, that's a lot of activity, a lot of thinking, a lot of ways to apply FIRE. So we're actually building business processes right now to document how we're using FIRE and how we need to use FIRE to integrate it and the outputs of FIRE into the work that we do every day at the CFIA to make sure that imported foods are safe. So I think we'll move to the next slide. So I mentioned earlier that we are currently working mostly in the microbiological hazard space. That was the place we started. And you can't start with everything. So you start somewhere. We have good data. We've really come a long way with respect to the model integrity and our ability to bring data in and make it communicate within the model. So Ashwani and team have actually started building the chemical hazard and the allergen side of the model as well. So we're becoming more complex. We'll be able to compare the relative risks across those different hazard categories. We're also continuously adding new data elements, right? So the model is not a stagnant model. We're always going to be continuously improving it. And Ashwani's team is being proactive at using machine learning and AI, as we saw before, to help us bring in things systematically. So it's not manual. We can do this routinely, weekly, monthly, whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that the incident data, the outbreak data, and data from other external sources is up to date. And you can imagine how that will make the model more powerful. We are using advanced methods in meta-analysis and Bayesian network analysis to improve fire results. So where there are data gaps, we have methodologies to help fill those gaps. And over time, the model will become more precise. And we've already looked at the machine learning and AI IT tools. And we're again getting into that trend analysis and forecasting space, which is going to help us to be even more proactive and to identify potential risks that we can respond to before it really becomes a big problem. And all the while, we're continuing to collaborate with internal and external and international partners like yourselves. We all have very important work to do. We want to acknowledge the significant challenges that you've taken on and the very important work that you're doing together to enhance food safety. We're equally inspired by that. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Ashwani for the last slide.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think that was it. Now maybe we can open for questions. Sam?
Every day, thousands of metric tons of food and beverages arrive in Canada by sea, land, and air. Thanks to food importers, Canadians enjoy a variety of foods year-round. Even with one of the best food safety systems in the world, we must continue to evolve to meet the challenges of a dynamic global food system. These regulations are built on three key elements that would bring Canada's food safety requirements in line with international standards: licensing, preventive controls, and traceability. Licensing, the first element, means that as an importer, you would need a license from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to import food into Canada. Secondly, you would need preventive controls in place to make sure your food is safe when you import it into Canada. The third element, traceability, means you would be able to trace where you bought your food and to whom you sold it. Let's look more closely at preventive controls and what this means. As an importer, you would need to understand the risks associated with the food you import and work with your foreign supplier to control those risks. How do you do that? The first step would be to know your food. This means being aware of any biological, chemical, and physical hazards that pose a risk of contamination to the food. You would need to describe the food you import, clearly identify those potential risks, and outline steps to control them. The next step would be to know your foreign supplier. As an importer, you would need to be sure that your suppliers are using safe conditions to prepare, store, and transport your product. For example, do you know how your suppliers control hazards such as pests in their food establishments? Do they know what ingredients are allergens in Canada, and have they properly identified these allergens? Have they taken precautions to protect food from contamination, like E. coli? And are their employees qualified to do their job? You would need to show that your foreign suppliers meet the same food safety standards required of our domestic manufacturers. The last step would be to clearly outline those steps in a written plan and keep it up to date. Preventive controls will go a long way toward protecting consumers from unsafe foods and reducing the chances of costly food recalls. Keeping clear records is also important when it comes to traceability, the third key element. You would need to document where you bought your food and to whom you sold it. These records become especially important if there is reason to believe a product is not safe for consumers or if it must be recalled. Visit our website and stay connected to learn more about the proposed Safe Food for Canadians regulations.
Very thankful to you all, to Catherine, Pamela, Greg, Ashwani, for your great contributions. I know we are going beyond the time that was allotted to this webinar, but the fact that our participants are still hanging on with us, I think, is a demonstration of the level of interest to this webinar. I know that there are a couple of actually key messages that I would like to keep from your interventions. The importance of the preventive aspect of the control that you are applying, and also the importance of basing your decisions on risk to focus your resources and to maximize the impact of the resources that a regulator has. Encore une fois, merci pour vos contributions donc dans les présentations qui ont été faites. We're going to take a couple of questions that are already that were expressed here, and if you don't mind staying a few more minutes, maybe 10 more minutes, to see if we can take also questions from participants. There is one question that I think is more generic in nature that comes from Paola. How much time it took to implement and to start working with fire? I think that's a practical question of interest to many regulators.
It's a really good question, Sam. We started with just fresh fruit and vegetable in microbial hazards. And basically, we sat down with our risk managers and the management, and we just wanted to make sure that, first of all, we had a good methodology, and any results we were producing, they were produced with the precision, and it met the requirement at the level of granularity also that our risk managers, wanted. So we really started with the fresh fruit and vegetable and microbe for the same reason. And then basically every few months we would add one extra commodity. So basically it was built basically brick by brick. And I would suggest any other our partners who are interested in building a similar model, start small. Make it sure that it fits the need, right? That's more important than how fast we develop or how much we increase the scope. So I would say, yeah, it has taken us around about 2 to 3 years where we are right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashwani. And if you allow me, I'm gonna translate briefly into French. Donc, la question était combien de temps ça a pris pour développer donc un système comme Fire et de le mettre en œuvre. La réponse rapide, donc ça a pris 2 à 3 ans. Et en fait, l'élément principal, c'est que le système a été construit de façon incrémentielle. Donc, on a commencé par un nombre de commodités, donc par exemple comme les fruits et légumes frais. Et puis, à partir de là, on a construit le système bloc par bloc. Et donc, l'idée, en fait, c'est de prendre son temps et de développer ça de façon à obtenir la précision voulue. I'm trying to see if there are any interventions from colleagues here. I saw maybe I'm going to ask actually my colleagues to give the floor. I'm not seeing who is asking, if there are any hands up here. Maybe Habib, if you can identify one of the colleagues who are asking for the floor for a question live, and maybe give them the floor and identify their names, because I cannot see who is having their hand up. Habib, can you Aditya Pankaj, I guess we're going to give you the floor if we see your hand up. If you wish to intervene, we gave you the floor. If you have a question directly. Okay.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm audible, sir.
Yes, you are on. Yes, we can hear you.
Basically, I'm seeing that the system developed for the food product safety and related to the risk assessment, that is fire system, is looking very broad and very large as per the some points they added. But there is also one very important point that right now in many countries we are using organic foods and other things. So it is very important that how any food product is produced or developed. Either it is organic or normal process using the pesticides and other fertilizers. So that is also a very important point for the assessment of risk of any food commodities.
So I
Like
guess if yeah,
yes,
if I try to understand the question, maybe it's the impact of maybe chemical hazards in the
yes,
models. You know,
yes,
I'm gonna try to summarize it in that fashion, given that we're talking about organic and therefore the potential inputs of chemicals. I don't know to what
yes,
extent, colleagues, that is included in your model. I've heard you that you are going to be moving further to
Yes,
increasing the
we are.
importance of the chemical side.
yes,
Yes, we are working on some of the proof of concepts. And just like microbial, we have started with some chemicals in some commodities. So gradually, we will be, bringing more into the fire model. So
Okay.
yes, we have started some of them as a proof of concept, but
Okay.
definitely they are not as far as microbial. But yes, I agree. What Aditya is talking about, that we definitely once the chemical model is more advanced, it will be able to differentiate and take those risks into consideration.
Ok, donc la question était sur la façon d'introduire finalement ou de tenir compte des dangers chimiques et la réponse est que donc le modèle est en train de prendre en compte justement ces dangers chimiques de façon incrémentielle et ceci est en cours d'amélioration. There was a question here about can the model work without data? I believe from public health, this is what is meant. Basically, can the model be developed or would the model be performing without information on outbreak or health surveillance program? Because basically the statement that is made here is this is a major limitation of many countries, and how can these data gaps can be addressed when such data is missing?
It's a really good question. I would say that, like, if we don't have, it depends upon the country. Because I always believe that there is never a situation where we don't know anything. There is always some information available, maybe not from that country, but a country that is, similar to that country, and maybe where the information is available, that country maybe is 10 times. So maybe you can look at the number of cases from that country and, make it into divide by 10. So you would have some information, right? So that's where we are, to some extent, in risk modeling. This is what we do. We never have all the information that we need, and we learn how to use the information that is available. That's where the uncertainty comes. That's where the variability comes, right? And we just learn to use that information. But yes, that is something, actually, Greg and I, we were talking about it a few days back, that, in some of the countries, that when we are, and to some extent, we are working with some other countries where they are using the fire as a blueprint model, where we just sat down with them last week and we were looking at some of the information they had in their country, and some of it was not there. So it's the same for us also. We didn't had all the information, right? That's why we are using information from different international sources. So it's just basically a logical way of thinking through it and saying what information is available, what is required, how similar it is to what we need. And then, you have to make some judgment calls, and you have to bring that uncertainty into the place. So in the future, at some point in time, yes, we are hoping that we would have some sort of little bit more framework where we could guide to countries that may have a lot of information compared to countries where we have a little bit less, and maybe somewhere where there is very less information available, because there's always something you can do about it with information that is available. This is, at least I believe.
Donc, merci Ashwani. Donc, la question était, est-ce qu'on peut finalement concevoir un modèle de la sorte sans prendre en compte les données sur les maladies d'origine alimentaire qui constituent normalement une des principales lacunes dans les pays en développement? Et la réponse est en fait, il y a toujours une source de données, quelle qu'elle soit, et notamment s'il y a une absence de données dans le pays lui-même, possiblement utiliser donc des sources de données de pays analogues, même avec des approximations, en tenant compte des comparaisons, par exemple, des impacts des maladies. Et donc, Ashwani a indiqué que c'est même le cas au Canada. Parfois, quand il y a une absence de données à l'échelle canadienne, on essaye d'avoir recours à des informations de pays tiers, par exemple des États-Unis ou d'autres pays. I see that our colleague Astu from Senegal has been raising her hand for a while now. Astu, welcome, and the floor is yours. I don't know if you can hear us, Astu. Astu?
Oui,
Oui, vous avez la parole.
oui. Je voudrais poser une question par rapport à ce modèle qui est très intéressant. Parce qu'ici au Sénégal, on avait essayé avec le couple aliment-danger et on a pu faire quand même le danger physico-chimique et les dangers microbiologiques. Et le modèle que vous avez ici, que vous avez présenté ici avec les dangers microbiologiques, serait très intéressant parce que ça définit en même temps le périmètre aussi. C'est-à-dire qu'on peut prendre à la place de pays, de mettre les régions sur lesquelles nous allons faire les échantillons. Donc, ça nous intéresse beaucoup. Est-ce qu'il y a une possibilité de nous former sur ce modèle ou bien comment vous procédez pour qu'on puisse mettre en œuvre cela? Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Astu. Merci, Astu. I will try actually. I think your question, Astu, joins and other sets of questions that I'm seeing in the chat and in the Q's and A's. So the question is, a number of countries are implementing risk-based import controls, and they are interested in essentially the approach that is provided by the CFIA. And is there a possibility for this model to be potentially translated, shared, and the Canadian experience to be shared with other regions? I see actually a question here for ECOWAS, the region of West Africa, the opportunity of supporting regions or countries to implement models that use the same basis.
I just asked my boss, she's sitting beside me and she said yes. So it's definitely yes.
Well, definitely yes.
We would love to do it.
Well,
we would love to
Pamela, and colleagues, thank you for that leadership. You can count on us to call you on that on that promise.
We will definitely need some help, Sam. We'll definitely need some help, some hands. But from a technical point of view, we will be very happy to support. From the knowledge perspective.
I think this is I think a great possible end to this meeting, because we could spend probably more time and at least an hour more to go through the questions. What I can commit to colleagues who are sending questions both in the Q's and A's and in the chat is that we will attempt, if it's technically feasible, to get all the questions, to try to address them with the collaboration of our colleagues from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. From the sound of it, and actually seeing that we have up to 122 participants 25 minutes after the programmed end time of this webinar, is I think an indicator of the level of interest to this topic. So a couple of things that we can follow up on is certainly to take on the questions and answers and to try to get these answers in writing, but also to maybe plan more dedicated sessions that can go a little bit more deeper into the into the implementation side of things. And I guess one of the opportunities that I may identify here is that within the AFRAF community, there is another working group that is dedicated to risk-based oversight and risk-based inspection and risk-based control. And definitely import control is one of the components of risk-based oversight. So I'm going to be making the recommendation to that working group. Of course, they need to agree on this, that they take on this aspect, and this can be maybe a more dedicated community of practice that meets together, and we can organize a dedicated workshop with more time, such that the Canadian experience can benefit as many food regulators in Africa and beyond. Donc, juste pour clore potentiellement donc cette session, et la question qui a été posée, c'est à quel point est-ce qu'on peut partager l'expérience canadienne avec les réglementaires en Afrique de l'Ouest, en Afrique en général et au-delà. Et donc, on a reçu la réponse de nos collègues de l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments. La réponse est affirmative. Et comme la réponse est affirmative, nous allons certainement agir sur cette promesse. Donc, en guise de fin ou de clôture à cette session, nous allons probablement également proposer au groupe de travail dédié à donc la surveillance des aliments basée sur le risque, donc un groupe de travail de l'AFRAF, de consacrer probablement davantage de ressources et de temps à cet échange d'expériences, et nous allons certainement demander l'aide et l'assistance de nos experts, des experts de l'Agence canadienne d'inspection des aliments pour ce faire. Donc, je ne sais pas, if you have any final points, Pam, Pamela, Catherine, Ashwani, Greg, please, and that will be the end point of this webinar. So we give you the floor as a final statement.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you this morning and to share our learnings and work, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. Merci infiniment pour votre contribution. Merci à tous les partenaires qui nous ont accompagnés dans ce processus et à tous les participants. Et nous reviendrons avec plus de webinars et davantage d'informations sur ce sujet. Merci à tous. Très bonne journée.
Merci beaucoup.
Technical difficulty.
We share with pride for a world where health is on our side. Collaboration and science as pillars. G-Force, we live for rigor. G-Force, together we